With such a huge focus on the protagonist in video games, it's very easy for any sidekicks or companions to be pushed aside in favour of the main hero. Hell, some games don't even have any major partners to accompany you for whatever reason, so when you do see a secondary character in a video game given such great courage and development throughout a game, it's a refreshing thing to see. So yeah, let's make a countdown on that. Now, rather than rank these on how important or famous they are, it's how good a job they do at being a sidekick and what they bring to help the main protagonist in their quest. There are many famous sidekicks out there, but I'm taking each character from a mostly gameplay point of view, so fame isn't much of a help here. Anyway, let's get this thing underway. On the first of what could be a lot of things I say that may annoy people about this list, first up is potentially the most famous companion on this list, YOSHI. Now, apart from the fact that 90% of the internet will argue that I don't pronounce Yoshi correctly, for the love of God, hear me out on this one. Of the games that Yoshi's appeared in as a bona fide companion, not games where he's been the main star or just another playable character, he hasn't been that much use. In Super Mario World, he was an extra power-up who could do some magic tricks with shells. In Super Mario Sunshine, he can turn enemies into platforms and destroy fruity barrier things, but he literally runs out of juice after a while and is insta-killed in water. In fact, one of the few shining moments in Super Mario Galaxy 2 was Yoshi given some extra dimensions to his gameplay, being able to aim his tongue on a whim and go crazy with some power-ups. I mean, Yoshi has his uses, don't get me wrong, but he's just not quite as good as his fame would lead you to believe. For me, his popularity is shown off best in his own games, where the little guy's actually got some personality to go with his horse-like role in the Mario games. He works very well as his own protagonist, but as a companion, there are some that do the job better. Dog has always been man's best friend, but when you're wandering around a post-apocalyptic wasteland with the only life around wanting to shove a gun up your ass, a dog that goes the extra mile for you is virtually indispensable, and so is the case with DOGMEAT from the Fallout series. The guy doesn't talk, I mean he's a dog, so he can't really even if he wanted to, but he's more than willing to tear your enemies a new one. DOGMEAT is brutally strong, starting off in the original Fallout as that one companion that you really should be getting during every playthrough. But if you manage to keep him alive until Fallout 2, for whatever reason, he is now obscenely powerful. Not really sure why they felt they had to make him almost broken powerful, but it did help this canine's iconic status. His popularity continued when he cropped up again in Fallout 3, and each and every time he was brought along for the ride, he just seemed to be loved even further. I don't know if it's down to the fact that he's one of the only consistent companions in the Fallout series, or how he's basically a really powerful pet, but he's a character that you really don't want to lose. Like, reload the game for ways to make him live longer type. I'm not about to make top 10 dogs in video games, but this guy is the top dog. It's been a while since I've said this, but I love Diddy Kong like a fucking brother. And ever since his first proper appearance in Donkey Kong Country, he's been a huge favourite of mine. Being a little blunt, Diddy Kong isn't that much different to Donkey Kong in this game, but it honestly doesn't matter that much. He's got all the same basic abilities as the big monkey man, but he can jump high at the cost of taking a bit more damage. I mean, I guess you'd expect that, Diddy Kong's hardly packing as many guns as DK. Bro doesn't even lift. Somebody at Nintendo then decided that this little guy needed his own game, and so he was promoted from sidekick to main protagonist in the second Donkey Kong Country game. But for the relevance of this video, he came back in the viciously difficult Donkey Kong Country Returns, where he does more of what he did in the first game, except he now acts as more of a power-up for DK, taking hits ahead of Donkey Kong. He's also packing his jetpack to help the pair jump further and for longer. At which point someone at Nintendo then decided that this wasn't enough for the face of Donkey Kong Country. Kind of. And so a second player can take control of Diddy and control him separately to Donkey Kong. So without Diddy Kong, Donkey Kong Country Returns would be half as good. Work that one out when you've got the time. You'd wonder whether a god would actually need a sidekick, but when you've been sleeping for 100 years and lost most of your powers, a little insect man called ISSUN goes some way to helping Amaterasu in OKAMI. It's kind of a case of working around a problem to solve it. Amaterasu has lost most of her godly powers since before, but with ISSUN's brushwork, life is made a whole lot easier and actually a lot more fun than what would otherwise be quite a conventional fighting system. The fact that you can pause reality and apply all manner of changes to it, ranging from restoring life to flora to slowing down time itself, really adds layer upon layer of gameplay that really comes to life in some brilliant boss fights. It does also help that ISSUN's character acts as a complete opposite to Amaterasu in just about every conceivable way. He's a tiny hot-headed insect man who can harness the power of art to help his wolfy deity friend who does rely quite a bit on the celestial brush to get work done. So one needs the other, and for all the mixed reception that the brush controls got, I found that they felt really interactive and engaging. The journey would certainly be a lot harder without this little guy, that's for sure. Oh KAZOOIE, where would the world be without your wisecracks and your abilities that are completely different to Banjo's? Big Bear Banjo might excel at jumping around a bit, but KAZOOIE is another one of those characters that brings something that diversifies the gameplay so much within Banjo-Kazooie and Banjo-Tooie. The humour is just a part of it. KAZOOIE fits snugly into Banjo's backpack, and from there she can do anything from helping Banjo to fly, help him up steep slopes, shoot eggs, and become invulnerable for a short period of time. It's kind of surprising that one bird can do so much, but KAZOOIE really doesn't mess around, especially when you get to Banjo-Tooie. Through a very exciting quest of getting items and breaking boulders, you can upgrade KAZOOIE to Dragon KAZOOIE, which turns KAZOOIE into a green fire-breathing dragon. Because you know what's better than a sassy bird that lives in your backpack and shoots eggs? A sassy dragon that lives in your backpack and breathes fire. It's Banjo and KAZOOIE, don't question it. I was never too attached to the Halo series. In between the fantastic gameplay and solid multiplayer, the storylines were very hit or miss, and I honestly couldn't care less about the majority of the characters. Even Master Chief himself is a bit of an empty set of shoes for the player to walk in, but that actually works to the advantage of his companion Cortana. Cortana is like Fi if she wasn't an annoying bitch. She's pretty much an artificially intelligent computer, but with a better appearance than a slab of plastic and circuit boards, and she proves to be one of the only characters in the series that the player feels some sort of connection to. In a way, she's the anchor to the story that the player needs, something that ties the gamer, Master Chief, and what goes on in the event of the Halo games all together. She's a bit like GLaDOS from Portal in a way, except with the sarcasm replaced by advice that might actually be helpful if there's an endless supply of FLUDD coming to eat you. She might just be a big pile of binary code, but she also stands as another icon from Halo, a character that the gamer got justifiably attached to. In a similar vein to Fallout, when you're tied to a quest that will eventually, oh, spoilers by the way, see your soul overcome by demons, banished and reincarnated as a horned baby, someone to take along with you is absolutely invaluable. AGRO the horse is more than a way of getting around Shadow of the Colossus' massive overworld. She's the one and only friend you have in this very bleak and lonely game. Sure, she helps you get around a bit quicker, but for some moments it's impossible to carry on without her. I guess you can make a comparison to Epona from Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, who would be another contender for this list. Epona has a similar role as basically a faster way of getting around the overworld, but Ocarina of Time never had the same desolate feeling that Shadow of the Colossus had, even when Ganondorf took over and trashed the place. And so, again more spoilers, this makes the eventual death of AGRO towards the end of the game even more heartfelt. Granted, she comes back at the end credits for some reason, but at the time, it made a depressing part of the game even harder when your one and only companion bites the dust. Shoddy ancient architecture. Whenever you put the words Legend of Zelda and companion together in the same sentence, there's quite a number of bad memories that come to mind. Hell no! Not too bad. Decent, but a bit one-dimensional after the first cutscene. Pretty good, but some people thought that she was a cynical bitch. Keep it away! It's funny just how many times the Zelda series has brought up such a, at best, mediocre sidekick for otherwise incredible games. you start to wonder if there's ever been a genuinely memorable and helpful companion within the series, and then you arrive at little old Spirit Tracks. This game's a bit of a mixed bag depending on your preferences. There's not as much exploration as other Zelda games, and some people just couldn't get their head around the Spirit Flute, but as soon as you're given the spirit of Princess Zelda as a sidekick, any skepticism is soon put to rest. I've always had some reservations about the damsel in distress being this character who you rarely ever see or even get to know. This has been a bit of a problem with Ocarina of Time and Twilight Princess, where there's probably 4 cutscenes in the whole game with who you're spending the entire game working towards. With Spirit Tracks, not only do you spend the whole game with Princess Zelda as a sidekick, she is a very tolerable and shockingly helpful companion. So let's talk about Phantom Zelda. Yeah, it sounds a little weird, I know. Due to the early events of Spirit Tracks, Zelda's spirit is detached from her body and she follows you throughout the game as like an infinitely more useful version of Navi, showing up every now and then to relay bits of information to Link. However, where she really proves to be useful is when possessing the phantoms dotted around the Tower of Spirits. You might have played the previous game Phantom Hourglass and you might know that the phantoms are creatures of debilitating torture that made an already annoying dungeon even worse. So to finally get in control of one is fun on a level that I can't even describe. It's a strange situation really, where all previous attempts at creating a companion for a Zelda game have been at best second rate, that once you finally get it right, it's a character who's been there since the very start, given a completely new role. That's more like it. It would be very easy for a 14-year-old girl to become a bit of a pain if you took her through a survival horror action game, but Ellie from The Last of Us is one of the very few that comprehensively buck the trend. But that's a funny thing though, because while the stereotype for the forced companion may mean that they become annoying and develop a strained relationship with the main character, Ellie isn't much like this. Well, okay, actually, she is at the very start and doesn't really want to listen to what you have to say, but this is more because of the fact that this 14-year-old girl is much more violent and unforgiving than you'd think. Because of this and her lack of knowledge of anything other than wall-to-wall violence, there will often be moments where you see the inner child come through when she asks questions to your main character about what life was like before. Even away from her complex personality and relationship with the main protagonist Joel, she is very useful in combat. Rather than sit on the sidelines and let you get on with it, she'll very happily show off her skills with a gun and her handy switchblade. It's not really something you see that often in games, a sidekick that is willing to fight without any input from the player, let alone that this is a child who's doing the fighting. Maybe that's why she's so loved, the combination of her willingness to fight along with her curiosity and how she's not a whiny brat. No wonder The Last of Us is loved so much. At which point we arrive at number 1, the reason why I decided to make this video in the first place. It took me a while to get around to playing BioShock Infinite, but by the time I finally did, it couldn't have been more worth the wait. For how incredible the first 2 BioShock games were, they had a similar mentality to the Fallout series. You'd end up going about your business, witnessing all the craziness going on, get screwed over by the game's inevitable turning point, and then credits. But for BioShock Infinite, there was a significant change in tone towards something a little friendlier. From the very start, you're tasked with finding a girl in the floating steampunk city of Columbia in order to wipe away some sort of debt. Now this already sounds like a typical damsel in distress cliche, but this is where BioShock Infinite delivers something completely different. Through one reason or another, your character Booker DeWitt is viewed by the citizens of Columbia as the false shepherd, a sort of antichrist to Columbia's saviour, Zachary Comstock. It means that when he does rescue the girl called Elizabeth, it becomes extremely hard to get the pair of them back to New York where he can pay off the debt. But this is the thing. Elizabeth doesn't follow a kind of Ashley Graham from Resident Evil 4 mentality. What she is hands down the greatest companion in video game history. Now, I know I'm supposed to look at each sidekick from a gameplay point of view, but because it's just so good, I cannot ignore Elizabeth's character and role in the story. For someone who spent most of her life locked up in a tower, Elizabeth's got some pretty impressive people skills, and the fact that she's constantly amazed at the outside world doesn't hurt her charm. She's not so much of a damsel in distress that needs rescuing, more of a genuine companion and friend that you'll go through the game with, witnessing the events of the game as they inescapably unravel before you. During the entirety of the game, she manages to create and maintain a relationship with Booker DeWitt, and you do start to notice how they seem to rely on each other to keep going. She never seems like a burden, someone you might have to drag through the game kicking and screaming, which brings me nicely along to the gameplay. Elizabeth in this regard is spectacular. As a starter, she doesn't have a health bar during combat, meaning that you don't have to worry about defending her from enemies. This turns Bioshock Infinite into more of a first-person shooter, and less like an adventure in babysitting someone that isn't allowed to die. Not only that, but when you're low on health, ammo or bath salts, she'll shower you in whatever you're low on. It's like she's at the opposite end of where she should be on the companion spectrum, legitimately helping you on your quest as opposed to sitting there soaking up bullets. And then there's the tears. This is what honestly makes Elizabeth indispensable. Due to a reason that is revealed further down the line in the story, Elizabeth can open portals up to alternate universes, which range from small crates of health packs to completely different realities. It's endlessly useful and gives her a constant role in the game rather than popping up with supplies in combat. The Bioshock series always valued itself on each game's atmosphere, how each game would keep you in the dark on what exactly is going on behind the scenes, and how you just have to keep going in pursuit of answers. The first two Bioshock games lent heavily on keeping the main character isolated, and to great effect, but with Infinite, with the addition of a companion like Elizabeth, it results in a completely different tone, but with similar levels of intrigue and suspicion. Plus, it's much better to have a self-sufficient companion who sets new industry standards than someone who only serves to cause you trouble. This has been rabbidluigi, and if you haven't played Bioshock Infinite yet, you're missing out on one of the best games of recent times. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care.